All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, FCM community. This is a podcast. It will be a podcast that goes over a lot of different things. One of the first things we are looking to talk about are the playoffs. We are on the precipice of the playoffs. They are tomorrow. We got a play-in game for the division, a bunch of wild card games, and then a bunch of crap after that. So we are going to talk about playoffs. And then after that, we're going to move into a little bit of a hodgepodge of topics, a couple of different things that we want to discuss. We're going to go over last off season's trades, some of the big ones, some of the small ones, and some of the in betweens. Might talk about position changes a little bit as well. Batty, was there another topic we had, or were those the kind of the three big things that we had pegged to talk about?
I think that's all we had. Maybe we'll figure something else to talk about during
Yeah,
it, but so far, pretty much that's it.
it's one of those things. A bunch of people are already in here listening. So if there are topics that people are curious about, want to chat about, want us to blather on about, by all means, add to the chat, and we will either ignore you or listen, depending on who you are. So, but we'll start with playoff predictions. So, interesting playoffs this year. A lot of races going down to the wire, which I found very interesting this year because some years you have that. You have a lot of teams really fighting to get in, and it goes down to the wire. Everybody's trying to get in. And some years, start of September, you see the playoffs. You know who's going to be there, and you're just like, meh, okay, that's it. It is what it is. But there was some tight races this year. It was good to see. And we'll start in the AL East. AL East came down to the final day of the year, final game of the year for Montreal, sadly. And that was all she wrote. You go into the last game of the season, playing the person you need to beat, all tied up, winner take all. And the Red Sox won 4-3, and took 2 or 3 from the Expos that last trilogy there at the end of the year to go into the playoffs. Congratulations to the Red Sox and making it out of the East. The Central was just its usual bloodbathian self. Kansas City finishing a very good 91-71 and still missing out on the playoffs with 3 teams at or near 100 wins. Cleveland wins the division at 100 wins. Chicago finishes second at 98, which means they will host the wild card game over the 96 win Detroit Tigers. And then in the West, which was wrapped up in about mid August, Seattle took that in a bit of a landslide. So, and they backed the fuck into the playoffs. 102 wins, but good lord, were they terrible on that last little stretch. So that is your American League lineup. So, Betty, let's start there. Who do you like in the initial play-in game, the wild card game? Who do you like? Cleveland? I'm sorry, excuse me, Chicago versus Detroit. Who do you think is going to pull out of that game to go on and beat the Mariners?
So first off, ouch, because I know it seems like if I make the playoffs, I'm a wild card team. The Indians haven't won the Central long time in FCM. I think since 2090. But in that one, that's a real interesting matchup. So you look at the White Sox and their offense, they hit a lot of homers. At the same time, with all those homers, they still don't have crazy high OPS. At least as what you look at with the Tigers. Tigers have a below average power team, but the OPS is still really good. You look at the parks. I mean, a mogul says they're both 105 parks, but I would think Chicago has a slightly better hitter's park just because of the homers. So while I would say that Chicago has a better offense, I don't think it's as much as the OPSs or the runs scored would suggest. It'll come down to pitching, I think. The pitching favors um, the Tigers. I really don't know who they have available to go. I did not check that out. Looks like
It's
it looks like
Ochoa. Ochoa
Ochoa
versus Falcon. I mean,
versus
it is
Falconer. Yep.
literally the game, the pitchers you want to pitch in a big game situation.
So I would just say, really, think it'll be a bloodbath. Uh, The White Sox have power pretty much all throughout the lineup. But again, I look at their park and you wonder how much of it is because of their their park. If I'm
which
gonna
is where they
take a
will be playing.
team,
They will be playing in Chicago.
yeah, so that will factor. But I'm gonna go with Detroit simply because it's Ochoa and he doesn't give up a lot of homers. Um, he's a guy who could play very well in that park. Be interesting if I had the box score parser stuff up to date. I could look and see what he's really done. Yes, of course I can see what he's done recently. The one game he got blown up, gave up 2 homers, but the other game on August 17th, um, uh, a 3-hit, 1-run ball. So more than not, I would just go with the Tigers. But it's a big coin flip. It's nothing that you want to be in when you're in the Central, when you're in this division. You always want to win it because I mean it seems like probably for the past 10 seasons, you're going up against another really good Central team. So if you can get that wild card bye and get into a division series, obviously much better for you.
I go back and forth on this matchup quite a bit. So if you look at their September record versus each other, the Tigers played 3 games versus the White Sox in Tiger Stadium and went 3-0. The White Sox played 3 games against the Tigers at the White Sox Stadium and went 3-0. So in September, they swept each other. The home team won all the games basically in September between the two of them. So I find that very interesting. Normally, I'm all on the GB train. Like I just I take him over just about anybody else in any series just because I I think he generally has a better team. Like he just has a well put together team. Like I never look at one of GB's teams, even the one that won the World Series, and go, "Huh, I want that team. That team looks great." Don't get me wrong. There are great players on there. They're always, but I think what it is the team is so well put together um, that I always favor him in most matchups because of that. But in this case, I think Chicago wins. I think Chicago has more power. I think they're playing at home, and Falcon gives up even less home runs than Ochoa does. And I know I'm butchering that name, and let's be fair, I don't care, and you all just like to make fun of it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I'm giving Chicago the slight edge. I think just the home field with a 3-time Cy Young Falcon pitching, the potential Hall of Fame pitcher Falconiero going. I'm giving the edge to Chicago in that wild card game.
Yeah, certainly it's not a bad pick. I mean, I would say it's probably like a 51-49 split. That's how much close. Heck, I even say it's like 50.1 to 49.9 split. It's so close.
Oh
The
yeah,
thing with
I give
GB,
it a straight coin flip, honestly, and I'm just picking the
yeah,
heads on Chicago.
right. I think the thing with GB is where he's been able to, why he always has a good team, a team that's gonna probably be in the playoffs is he kind of keeps things balanced. He has enough contact, enough speed, enough power, and defense, and then the pitching. So it's kind of like one of those things of, yeah, so maybe if the power kind of goes away, well, there's still the average to fall back on. All of that goes away, well, then there's the defense and the pitching. So it's kind of like you have a lot of different things to play off of. You're not kind of just waiting for the 3-run home run to save you, or you're not banking on a lot of like 2-1 games. There's a lot of different scenarios that can happen and that his team can win.
Right. So if we really get into the nuts and bolts of it, yeah, that's where GB gets the edge. And I also think because those are very good points. Something that could be a factor too is Cool's not playing. Cool will not be available for Chicago for that wild card matchup. Is he their best player? No, God, no. He's their second baseman. He puts up solid to good numbers. But he is not playing. Will that make a difference? For a guy that relies on ground ball pitchers and that room in defense up the middle, you're throwing your big ground ball pitcher, and half of your guys that make him as good as he is gone, what is that going to do for the team? So, while I am picking Chicago, there is that. Who is he going to play in instead? Is he going to play Nelson Boykin? Is he going to play a non-bat in McFetteridge just to get the defense there? Even though the speed's not there, I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of depth, and so I would not be surprised if the almost the small ball Tigers take advantage of that one key cog being out of place to roll over them. But I'm still picking Chicago because of home field, and I like his pitcher a little bit better. But it's honestly a coin flip. I will not be surprised one way or the other on which that goes. So, but we'll move on. That was just one matchup out of many that we have to talk about. But we'll stay right there. So I have the White Sox. You have the Tigers. They are going on to face my Mariners. You took the Tigers. How do the Tigers fare against the Mariners?
They blow them out of the water.
All right, and so
Same
I have
answer for the White Sox too. What I've kind of that's a short answer. But I figured out this. Yeah, you had a good season, but you feasted on the AL West, which I think when I added it up, they averaged out like 74 wins. Or if you go by the Pythagorean, no, it was I think they averaged like 72 wins, and if you go by the Pythagorean, they averaged like 74. So pretty crappy division beyond you. You had a good season, not taking that away from you, but I think your numbers are a little bit jacked up because of the lack of competition. It's not going to be fun playing either Chicago or Detroit. It's definitely kind of one of those things of probably really didn't want to win the most games in the AL because you had to face one of them. You'd rather take your chances with either Boston or Montreal, which, Montreal did the Gilly thing. But I would say either of those two teams would advance past. But hey, it's Mogul.
Yeah, I think the only chance I have is Mogul being Mogul. I'm not even going to sit here and pretend to think that my team is better than the two central teams that made the wild card only, because I don't. And it's not necessarily because I play in the AL West, and the AL West is what it is. I don't have that starting pitcher that everybody else has. Most other teams have that guy. That guy that you're confident when you pitch him that your chances of winning are better than they are of losing. I don't have that guy. I like my pitchers. Do not get me wrong. And a lot of them have pitched very well the last 2 months of the season. I mean, my four of my starters over the last 10 games they've pitched have pitched at I hate to use the term, but almost ace level pitching. I mean, these are guys that in the last 10 games, 297, mid threes, so not all ace level, but they've all pitched, very well. But again, you have to look at the teams they're facing. So in the last 10 games, who are they facing? AL West, Minnesota and Chicago and Boston, sure. Not necessarily the best teams out there. So I understand why nobody wants to give Seattle no respect, and I'm not going to give them any respect either. I think the way that they could win, we have a good lineup. Is it as powerful as Chicago's? We didn't hit as many home runs. But I think that's where you get worn down with solid pitching and good hitting, and that's how Seattle beats you. The fact that I'm missing my star second baseman who was having a career year, and my just plug and play shortstop that I've used for over a decade who was also having a career year, and they're both out for the playoffs. I find it inconceivable that would beat either Chicago or Detroit. As much as I want to, it's not going to be in the cards. I just hope I don't get swept. I hope I put a couple wins in there, make it look respectable at least. But no, I'm taking Chicago over Seattle on that side of the AL bracket. And you took Detroit over them, so we're on the same page basically. So moving on to Cleveland and Boston. The Indians won 100 games out of the Central, which based on how everybody feels about the Central compared to the other leagues, means they probably won like 120 games. And the Red Sox outlasted Montreal, a surprisingly stubborn Montreal, to win the East. So, um, since it's your team, I'll take this one first. This is an interesting matchup. Again, I think the Indians are. I think anybody out of the Central is really the teams to beat um, coming into the playoffs this year. Um, with your lineup all tanky because you took all your guys out for the last sim, I have to hit sort here for a second to see what might or might not be the proper lineup. Um, again, much like you talked about Detroit, not a lot of power. I mean, your biggest bat hit 31 home runs. After that, you had two guys in the early 20, young 20s. A couple guys with big stolen base numbers. I think that in solid pitchings, you are without Cologne, I believe, for the playoffs.
No, just for the first series.
14 days, I'm going to guess you might get him back in the ALCS if you make it on that far. So what was you relying on Rivera and Donaldson and Kevin Andrew, who had a good year this year, to kind of get you through. And I think those are three good arms. So with that and the offense and the defense, which is quite solid, I think that more than likely gives you an edge over the Red Sox, though I really do like the Red Sox. This is going to be nobody gave Fred enough love this year. I might have in the pod. I don't remember. He didn't yell at me, so I didn't not give him love. Whenever I say a bad thing about Fred, he's very quick to let me know that he's not happy with me giving him no love. So, but I do like this Fred Sox team. I mean, it's just a lot of young guys up and coming. Jake Gressel, Fred Sloan's been around for a while. Josh Cooper was the big trade last year. Charles Miller. This is a good looking lineup. Defensively, they're pretty solid, if not more than solid. So I think this is a team that will give Cleveland a little bit of trouble. I think where the difference maker is that Boston does not have the pitching. Boston does not have the pitching compared to Cleveland. Kevin Dorton is a solid pitcher, is having a decent year. Machiavellian, again, a solid pitcher, having a solid year. But I don't think they're enough to overcome Cleveland, even with Cologne being missing. I'm going to say as PR tries to kill us.
Yeah. There we go.
And mute. There we go. Got him. All right. So, what is your take on your series?
Well, I would kind of just look at my team and think I kind of have a runaway. I won't have my right fielder, which I forget his name right now. Yeah, I won't have Brett Alexander for like the first 2 or 3 games. Just depends on how many off days we get before the season. Before the series starts. But I'll still have Mancio and Arciega, Fitzgerald, and of course the other guys. Of course, I won't have Cologne. I think if I projected it out, again, based off of how many off days we get, and of course me advancing on so long that I advance, he would be back for like game 3 of the ALCS. I think I have enough pitching. Rivera and Donaldson are both pretty good pitchers. Andrew had a really nice season. I don't know if I believe him at a 2.84 ERA. And Brinson, he was solid enough. I mean, at least 4 guys that I feel good enough about the matchup, especially against Boston. I don't really think a ton of their rotation. They could definitely prove me wrong. Dorton and McIlvain had very nice seasons, but with them out pitching their dice by more than a run, I a good bit of luck for them to pitch that good. And after that, there's not much to worry about. They do have a nice back end of the bullpen, at least as far as results go. But I don't think there's a lot of pitching there. Where they are dangerous is the lineup is the 2, 3, 4, 5. They are all pretty nice bats. Sloan, solid for him for a while and had a big season. Again, I wouldn't really think of him being a 35 homer guy, but he did it, so good for him. Grashel is a very nice bat. Cooper, very good bat, and Charles Miller is another guy who I kind of look at and say, he's a real solid bat. He doesn't do anything overly amazing, but he does everything kind of solid. So he can hit for average, he can draw walks, and he has a little bit of pop. So yeah, it'll be an interesting season or series. I would expect to win because I think I have the better lineup. We'll get Alexander back after what 1, 2, 3 games, whatever it's going to be, and I do have the pitching. So we'll see. I think in times when I feel really good about my team, that's when the playoffs that I don't do as well. But for picking, yeah, I'll pick my team. Say 4 games.
All right, and that brings us on to the ALCS, and both of us have an all Central ALCS, which probably won't be a surprise to many. So in my bracket, I have Chicago versus Cleveland, and you have Detroit versus Cleveland. And again, at that point, if Chicago will have Coolback, they'll be healthy. This is where it gets tough for me because I like Chicago's lineup better. I want to give the edge to Cleveland's rotation, just because Chicago, big fan of Falcon. The rest of the guys, I just don't think they're okay. They're solid. I mean, I feel the same about them as I do about some of my pitchers, like solid pitchers, if not good pitchers, but like not guys you're like, ha, I got them in my rotation in the playoffs. You're all fucked. Like that. That's not how I feel about my pitchers. That's certainly not how I feel about Chicago's pitchers past Falcon. So I'm giving the edge to Chicago in the bats. I'm giving the edge to Cleveland on the pitching side. So it's going to be who does more damage. Who does Chicago out hammer Cleveland? Does Cleveland out pitch Chicago? I really think that was going to come down to. So when you look at the pitchers that Cleveland has, are they home run prone? Rivera's home runs this year are down by almost 2/3. I mean, he's absolutely having one of those. I hate to overuse the term, but career type of year. You move on to a guy like Donaldson, who just doesn't give up many home runs, and he's given up even less this year. It looks like everybody in that lineup, geez, everybody in that rotation has given up far less home runs this year than they did last year, which is just minus Brinson, but Brinson was in a new park, so you give the edge to the rotation in Cleveland. Do they have enough bats to overcome the opposing things in Chicago? I think Chicago's lineup is better. I think Cleveland is the better all-around team. I'm giving the edge to Cleveland. I think they take it in 6.
Yeah, so as I kind of picked Detroit, but I'll talk about the White Sox as well.
Well, you took the Tigers. How about the Tigers? You took the Tigers. I took the White Sox.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Oh, well, whatever. I took the Tigers, you took the White Sox, but I can talk about both. The White Sox, yeah, they would pose the serious threat with the home runs, and they have the guys at the top of the order. They have the speed. They have a very good lineup. Absolutely nothing against them with that. It's pretty clear that they can hit, but kind of like you said, beyond Falcon, there's not much to really be concerned about. Even in their bullpen, nothing to be overly concerned about. Levick, he's definitely better than what okay, with Baltimore he was bad overall, but with Chicago he was good. So, but I think, kind of like in past seasons, the White Sox bullpen has not been very good. So unless Falcon and the other pitchers can go really deep in the games and not give up runs, and of course then hit a lot, hit for a ton. Once you get into 6th, 7th innings, they could be giving up a lot of runs with the. So I like my team better than the White Sox, but if I'm gonna go with my pick with the Tigers, just in the way things go, it's going to be a real test to the mogul gods because they seem to really like to screw GB in the playoffs. Like it's their guilty pleasure. They just really love to do that. He's had some really good teams that have not done shit, and then I think he's had some really solid teams and they've won it all. So who knows? And with me, I feel pretty good about my team, but again, they don't like to let some of my star players do what they do in the playoffs. They turn the dust. So if I have to play Detroit, I'll say Detroit wins. But to play Chicago, Chicago.
All right. So that's it. And that brings us to, again, so brings us out of the AL and on and over to the National League. Now, the National League is giving us that extra off day, which is very nice of them. Thank you. As the Reds and Pirates actually have to play a play-in game for the division. The winner of that game goes on to face the Giants. The loser goes on to face the Phillies in a one-game playoff to then have the ability to go on and play the Nationals. So a little bit of intrigue there in the NL Central, kind of like there was a little bit of intrigue in the AL Central this year. So let us look to see how that looks. So Verp is the pitcher that Jermaine would really want to be pitching on this game. However, that will not be the case as he is out. It'll be interesting to see who he picks in his stead. Does he go with Stan Shear? Or does he go with this rookie who had two good starts in Lukowski? Yeah, sure, Lukowski. That sounds right. Fucking.
Well, he can't go with Shear because Shear's out for a day.
Shear's out for a day, but is the game on the 30th?
Yes, it is.
Well, then he's going with Lukowski. Is my nope? Lukowski's out for 4 days. Okay, so I'll make this real easy. He is going to go. He is going to go with Balam. Or he has to go with Balam. Oh, good Christ! And Farrell's out too. All right, so if Jermaine really wants to win that game and wants to do something goofy, he goes with Mullock. I did that in TCM one year because my rotation sucked and I somehow made the playoffs. I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna throw my ace closer out there and see what happens. And he went like 4 innings of shutout ball, and then my mop up guy came in and I got slacked. So I'm gonna go ahead and say more than likely he's gonna go Balam because Jermaine plays things pretty straight. And the Reds are going to go with they don't care who. MVP or not, I do like the Pitt team. They're a feisty little bunch. But without a pitcher to pitch in that pitching game, I'm giving the heavy edge to Cincinnati, who has Rose available if they wanted to go with him. Or Gary Sodders if they wanted to go with a Minnesota throwback. But I'm going to guess they're going to go with Rose. He's been their top pitcher, at least in the rotation all year. And they have a pretty solid lineup themselves. They have a guy that had an outside shot at the MVP themselves in Toby Zendazada. So I'm giving the Reds the win on that one. They'll go on to face the Giants. Pittsburgh will go on to face the Phillies in the wild card game. And in that wild card game, I do believe Philly is probably well set on the pitching department. They have stolen goods and Patrick Jr. ready to throw. And even if they choose not to throw him, they'll have Mike Walsh ready to go instead, who had a very, very good year. Doesn't matter if they go Walsh, doesn't matter if they go Jr. Both are excellent pitchers, and both will shut down the feisty Pirates and move on to the next round. It is unfortunate that Philly is without one of their big bats, as Alazaro is out for at least the first series and a half, if not first two series. But I still think they have enough between the pitching and what hitting's left to beat the Pirates and move on to face the Nationals. So, Maddie, what do you have in the play-in game and then in the wild card game?
So I didn't realize that Pittsburgh's pitching situation was as jacked up as it is. So I'd initially thought the Pirates, but it's interesting. I look at J-Man's strategies. I would go a complete opposite of what he usually does with his pitcher use. I would pretty much go to I'd almost go -5 pitch counts, -5 pitch through trouble, at least for the playing game, or at least for the play into the playing game. Because as soon as Balam gets into any trouble, just go to the bullpen right away. Get him the hell out of there. Don't let Mogul try to have him work through it, and then all of a sudden, what's a 3-run um, a 3-run lead by the Reds now, and then it turns into 6 or 7. So that'd be something to where I think you could not have to start Mullock, but you could get to him quicker that way. Yeah, that kind of throws my picks kind of upside down because I didn't see that, and I had a pretty good idea of how I thought the National League would go. The Reds have made one heck of a run late to get into the playoffs, or at least to get into the situation. Don't really see much that's really great about their pitching staff. Some good pitchers having some good years, and that's just fantastic. But yeah, they would obviously want to pick Gross. Actually, Gross is pretty good, probably their true ace. They might go Rose with the play into the plan, because I think it could be pretty important to win the division and face the Giants, rather than hope that you rather than play the Phillies and hope that you can then face the Nationals. Much easier route to go if you win the division. So yeah, I'll go the same route and go Cincinnati. That pit Cincinnati versus the Giants, but actually, first it'd be Cincinnati versus the Phillies. Phillies got a pretty good team. They are missing some bats, or at least the one big bat, Aluazar. That could be a pretty big pretty a pretty big miss for them, but they're probably going to pitch Patrick in the first game. So you think if you can just score 3 runs, you win it. And it'd be them versus Pittsburgh, and with Pittsburgh missing what they are, maybe he does pitch. Shearer will be available, so he probably does go with him. But Shearer versus Patrick, you take Patrick probably 10 out of 10 times. So, yep, you have Philadelphia going on to face the Nationals. And again, the Reds facing the Giants. Oh, the Giants, yeah. The NL West is not very good either. So, what does that really mean for them? Cantrell will at least be out for the division series, so that puts a little bit of a damper, at least into their power. Then I just kind of wonder about the Reds and how good they really are too. And they'll miss Cosby for close to the whole series. Heck, I just go with the Giants now with that one, because if they do have some other parts there, some other pretty good bats. Their rotation is solid.
Cantrell, so.
Oh yeah, they do have him still.
I mean, he's not a great bat, but he's fine defensively. And when you're looking for a fill-in for a guy that's pretty good, you take the guy that's also pretty good.
Yeah, hey, and he does have a 972 OPS in the playoffs.
Yep.
I mean, kind of with these kind of bats, all it takes is one swing, and your playoff stats look pretty good. So if he can run into just one of them in this series, then it'll be a good play, especially with the defense. So yeah, I do kind of think I'm kind of going with the Giants over the Reds. Then you have Nationals and the Phillies. That'll be an interesting series. See what they did head to head, because I did not look at that one. Pretty much thought that the Nationals will just run right through them. But let's see what they did during the regular season. Not that it matters much of anything, because we'll just say, screw you, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. So Nationals won 11 of 8 games, or 11 of 19 games. So, yeah, relatively, it definitely does go into the Nationals' favor, but nothing's so drastic that you think that they're going to walk right through them. But yeah, the Nationals do have a better team, and one of Philly's better bats is out, at least a good chunk of that series too. So yeah, I'd definitely say the Nationals will pass them as well. So yeah, the Nationals and the Giants in the National League Championship Series.
Yeah, I like the Giants. I like their top three. I like their bats, even with Cantrell missing. I think they don't skip too much of a beat, and they skip past the Reds. Um, well, without too much issue. I mean, I like it. I like the Reds. They're again another little spunky team, but I think the Giants are the clear favorites there and should move on. And I am the same thoughts as well. Washington versus Philadelphia will be very interesting. I think this is where the hurt batsman will hurt Dave. I mean, again, he has Walsh and Jr. at the top of the rotation, and those are two guys you want to see at the top of the rotation. I mean, those are two guys that two guys I wish I had in my rotation. Let's be honest. If Seattle had those two guys, it'd be a lot more bullish on my team than I am at now, having Junior and Walsh. So, um, but I think when you run into a guy like Lee Laughlin, for as much as we've talked about him and we'll continue to talk about him for a while yet, um, and then a resurgent Brant Wright having a hell of a year out there, and then even Christian Atkinson you could throw as a third one, um, and be fine over Rydell or Renafio. So, um, and then even look, Jim Zinagovsky had a little bit of a nice run out there in a couple games in Washington during the end of the season tank for contenders. So I like the rotation in Washington as much as I do in Philadelphia, if not maybe a little bit more. And I like the bats quite a bit. I think Peter's lineup is generally pretty good. Now I'm just double checking to make sure that there isn't any injuries that I'm missing. No, Bush will be back in time. The other guy doesn't play. Yeah, so I mean, I'm giving the 104 win Nationals the advantage there and the win over Philadelphia to go on and face the Giants. And this is where it could get interesting because, again, Washington seems to be the clear favorite over the Giants. But if Cantrell does come back in time, and again, based on my math, which is horrible, he should be back at some point that series. I just don't know if it's enough. I don't know if San Francisco has enough everything yet to overcome a team like the Nationals. So going Peter. I'm going for everybody's absolutely hoped for World Series matchup: Peter versus Matty. So that is my World Series matchup: Washington versus Cleveland.
Yeah, so the Cantrell thing, pretty much just like Alexander, he'll be back. Well, he's hurt, I think, one more day, so it'll be like game 3 or 4 of the championship series, should they make it that far. So he'll be back in plenty of time to make a difference in that series. Um, I don't know really how the Giants do much in that series other than Mogul being Mogul. You know, they do have some things that are good, but you know, Washington is clearly better than they are. But I think Mogul likes to do the same thing, the things to Peter that it likes to do with me when I think you have a really good team. They just flounder in the playoffs, so that could be really interesting. But Nationals should just waltz into the World Series, which I think is interesting for your prediction of it'd be myself versus Peter. Two people I think just in general have pretty solid teams year in, year out, but don't have a lot of playoff success for whatever reason that is. Um, but so it could be the ultimate the Mogul Gods War of which one does it want to fuck over more.
It should be interesting. I am kind of excited to see what happens with my projected matchup of Washington versus Cleveland. Um, and again, where it comes down for me is um, rotation. It comes down to rotation, I think, for me in the World Series. I think both lineups are similarly built. Um, might even give Cleveland a slight edge on the lineup build in that World Series matchup. But I'm definitely giving the excuse me, the Laughlins the rotational advantage. for as much as I like both rotations, I think Washington wins in a squeaker. I'm not saying 7 games. I'm gonna go Washington in 6 over Cleveland. And that's just a guess. I don't know. I mean, Andy thinks the Giants and Indians are gonna be the ones in the World Series, so um, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel good that he's picking that because absolutely nobody's picking the Mariners. So mogul gods do appreciate that. But we are trash, so I wouldn't worry about them anyway. But that's my pick. My pick is Washington over Cleveland in 6.
Yeah, so I definitely see myself losing if I get there just because Mogul doesn't want me to win. But so my pick was between the Tigers and the Nationals. But before that, I will take a step out and say, yeah, J-Main, I did like you to win the division. I did like you to beat the Giants in the division series. However, as Mizzy kindly pointed out, your rotation is like horse shit right now. So just getting out of the wild card game kind of be a miracle. However, so getting back to the World Series, it's a tough one. It could be a tough one too because Mogul doesn't seem to like to give back-to-back champs, but it doesn't like Peter teams. So, fuck it. Just if this is the matchup, our file just might implode. The
So
league's
a
over.
lot of GM's heads. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Um, just out of sheer talent, it'd be the Nationals, but it's out of sheer how Mogul likes to do things, and that balanced team approach I think is really good in the World Series. I think that's what the Royals had with D. Lee. They had some power, they had some speed, they had some pitching. Not great pitching. I think the Tigers' pitching is better than the Royals had, but relatively the same kind of team. A little bit of balance. They can do a little bit of everything. So I would say the Tigers will go back to back.
Interesting take. All right. And I don't necessarily think it's a wrong take. I mean, I don't. Every year, I think GB's out of it, and then he crawls back in. So I honestly have no idea how the fuck he does it. Don't know. Not gonna try to figure it out. Ugh, more power to him, to be honest with you. So, um, yeah. All right. So those are our predictions. I do believe in the chat, Andy threw a prediction out there. He calls Giants versus Indians with the Red Sox winning. So, not sure how that happens, but those were Andy's predictions. So, um, all right, we are going to move on to the next topic. Let us go with, we'll talk about the trades first. How about that? That's a bigger topic. We'll go with that. Um, oh, I'm sorry. Andy picked the Giants to win. Andy thinks Giants Indians with the Giants beating the Indians. It's a rogue pick. I like it. Not going to happen, but that's fine. Um, all right. So, Batty, the trades.
The trades, yeah. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting because we usually don't do any pods this late in the season. It's usually like a preseason pod and then a post-draft pod. But I think I thought it'd be interesting to look back at the trades that happened during the off season, not only off season. So from the time that the playoff file, that the post-playoff file was posted, to the Sim 1 file being posted. And I know sometimes trades do kind of trickle over, like the Junior Patrick trade into the season. However, those don't count. Not looking at those, just kind of looked at a few trades that happened truly over the offseason that were bigger, maybe bigger names, bigger players, bigger rating. See how they kind of played out. Like, was it worth it to make that trade, or did it kind of blow up in your face? So the first one, just went right down the order. I actually picked out 2 trades because they were done by the same team or the same teams, thinking on different days. But it is the Mariners and the Royals. Now the Royals got third baseman Alfaya and first baseman Jim Ganez. Why it's not Jimenez or something else, I don't know. That's a great mogul name for you. Now, they gave up a bunch of prospects and a really wonderful first baseman, third baseman, Mendez. So, Mizzy, since you made the made those trades, where were you coming from to trade Alfaya? Because I did find that really interesting, as well as Jimmy, because Jimmy was a really nice lefty bat for you, and you love your lefty bats.
I love lefty bats, and Seattle loves lefty bats. The park, not the people. The people could care less. So it was one of those things that I was like, you know what, I am going to float Alfaya out there, um, see if anybody jumps on him, see if I can get something that I like for him, and kind of go from there. So part of my reasoning was, don't get me wrong, I loved Alfaya. Look, I mean, he's still phenomenal third baseman. Um, Part of the thing with me was he had a career year last year. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he had a career year last year. Um, and he wanted a shit ton of money. Um, I mean, don't get me wrong, we got him an Arby. You know, he still got Arby for almost $19 million. And with our finances now the way that they are, um, at some point I had tough decisions to make. Um, Unlike some GMs who might or might not be now a co-GM somewhere, I prefer not to put off my big decisions. I prefer to jump while the jumping's good, and not sit around and play games too much with it. So I had a serious bidder in KC, and we went back and forth a while. To be fair, I should have pushed a little bit more, especially on the Alfaya deal, mostly because like he was not willing to give up picks. I like some of his specs, so it kind of made sense for both of us. Um, but let's be fair, the player that he is, I should have really held out and gotten some of those picks. Not that they necessarily would have turned out any better, but should have been a little more pushy on some of that stuff. As far as Jimenez, and the other thing with Alfaya too, that maybe was a little bit of a scare on my part. He had dropped last year at 28, and for some reason, most of the time when I have guys 28 that have a drop, even if it's a small drop, it usually spells bad things. It didn't yet for Alfaya. That's great. It's especially for G Money, but it was just one of those things between that and the money. Career year that I knew he was not going to be able to pull out again. I decided if I can get good value out of him, I'm going to move him, and so I did. Jimenez was another guy that, part of the reason why I was easy to move him. As another thing, he was another guy making not a lot of money, but as you can see, he was making a fair amount of money with me. I think he was making 11 and a half or something like that, and then he had just re-signed for 15 more. So again, he was a guy that was going to be making more money. And part of the return package I got for these gentlemen was a young first baseman who I believe you think is going to peak out this offseason, in Adrian Cox. Adrian Cox looks to be a very similar player to Jimenez. His contact might not quite be as high when it's all said and done. Powers can be about the same. Eyes can be a little bit less. But I got a guy that was cheaper, and I figured Seattle being Seattle, probably do just fine hitting wise out there. So I was happy to make his acquaintance. The other piece that I got in those deals was Leo Cirillo, another guy that I know a lot of people aren't big fans of. He had a up and down kind of year in Seattle. Started out real good, had a pretty good year, and then kind of blew up toward the end, and just really started shitting the bed in July and August. And so it was one of those things. I still like Cirillo. We'll see that last jump that he should have left, what that might do for him, if that's going to make him a better pitcher or not. It might not. He might end up just shitting the bed. A lot of the other specs that I got in that deal, I used immediately to move on and get other pieces. So some of the things that I got out of those specs is I was able to go out and get a guy, a very solid outfielder, in Aaron Kruger, 27 years old, young, not making a lot of money. He had a very good year this year in Seattle, over 800 OPS, over 300 average, pretty solid fielder as well. I was also able to go out and get another guy from Atlanta, and that was a new first baseman, Colin McCartier, who, again, in the grand scheme of things, is 1 year younger than Jimenez and ended up being signed for about the same amount of money. So didn't end up saving any money on that one, but the type of hitter he is, I really like. I mean, that guy had in 100 plus games in Seattle, 1,000 OPS, 344 average, 23 home runs, 28 doubles. Like he did exactly what I needed him to do and more. Um, I was able to go out and get a couple other pieces with the pieces I got in that deal. Another unsung piece that I think people mostly ignored was Ed Belgrove, um, who is just a masher against right-handed pitchers. I mean, he's just a monster against righties this year. Again, he had almost an 1100 OPS. So, yeah, straight platoon. I'm well aware of that, and I'm okay with it. So, it was one of those things. The value of guys that I got back, I liked. Saved a little bit of money in the process. And all in all, I feel that I made out fine. Is KC a much better team for getting those guys than they would have been without? Absolutely. Um, did I still win 102 games this year? Yes, in a weakened AL West. I don't need to hear it again. You all just say that nonsensically all the time. Still won 102 games after moving those pieces. Got a little bit younger in the process and got a little bit cheaper. So, in my books, I'm good with all that. Nope, not hearing you, Maddie.
Sounds like you explained it so much that Maddie just like fell asleep.
Probably what happened. That's fine. It's his mic. He has trouble with that. He says he lost me, but really we lost him. So it is what it is. I will move on to the next trade in the list once Maddie figures out his electronic malfunction. We will get back to him and still can't hear you, Maddie, and his opinion on the Seattle KC deals. So the next trade is another Seattle deal because Seattle. And that was Seattle sending catcher Jordan to LA for pick 13. This was the trade that helped push Andy along for his Christmas Day miracle of the AL West trade bans. So he says, at least in the pod that I listened to the majority of this morning, that it was more to protect other people of the AL West. But let's be fair, it's just a punishment for me. But it was one of those things. People were shocked and awed. How could Dan do that again to Mike and trade in pick 13 for a catcher that's meh, blah, 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 blah. I had other offers on Jordan. I had an offer just a few picks later than 13 on Jordan. So when pick 13 came across, I took that one instead. He's not a bad player. He's not a terrible player. Everybody wanted to yada 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 about it, but when it comes down to it, he's a solid catcher. I'm trying to look up his numbers. Looks like he did not. Looks like he had a bit of a drop this year in LA. That's unfortunate, but still put up pretty decent numbers as a batter and as a catcher. So I mean, 35% still caught stealing. Good defense, solid bat, lefty hitter. You'll take that. Pick 13 was what it was. Again, I had an offer just a few picks later than that, so it's not like I was snookering Dan out of picks that he didn't have. So Matty says he's back, so we're going to go back to the original KC Seattle deals and let him talk about those.
Actually, I'd rather talk about that Jordan trade first.
You do you, Matty. All right, I talked about both Seattle deals as much as I didn't want to.
Yes, you had a long-winded break. Go get you some agua. So
moves my 18xx games. It's fine.
The Jordan trade, I don't think it was as bad as some made it out to be. Even myself, I just kind of jumped on the good old dog pile just because it's Mizzy. Why not? It's fun. But there's a little bit about because I was talking with Dan about Helland, and now maybe it's that I just overshot my ask, but I was just really baffled that he made no attempt to come back and kind of counter offer what Mizzy was offering him to say, hey, can you do something better? Because I think at the time and what you see, as well as with a drop, that Helland is better than Jordan. How you can say, yeah, I'd rather Jordan than Helland. That's just kind of weird. But Jordan, he had a fine enough season. He had actually a pretty good season, but I wouldn't expect that going forward, especially because of that drop. Even without the drop, I think the value given up was just assuming that a good jump was guaranteed. Now you're just hoping that he gets back to where he was last offseason. He lost value on that. I guess again, just go back and say, hey, can you offer me a better value than the other guy? And that wasn't happening. It was just kind of weird that he did that, especially with Mizzy being in his division. Now going to those flurry of Royals trades. One thing, Mizzy, I think you need to go back and listen to yourself on is you said Belgrove hits righties well. No, he actually hits a lefty as well.
Did I mix that up?
Yeah, you got that backwards. Kind of
Well,
like the walk-offs or the walkouts. But it wouldn't be a pod for you to get something completely bass-ackwards. So yeah, I was a little surprised that you traded Alfaya. He's one of the better third basemen in the file. But from what I remember, Yekin said that in the preseason pod, it was a bit expensive. So trade him now, get yourself something guaranteed. That's better than type. I see it. I get it. However, I don't think much of Cirillo. I think he's just, he's okay, but he looks better because of the 90 control than being rather than being a really good pitcher. I think the homers and the OBA would just plague him as it did this year. Yeah, Belgrove, solid fourth outfielder, and it's not that he's not useful, but not being an everyday player just limits his overall value. Oh, and now I think the biggest get was Cox. You just love getting the Cox. He's risky, but I think he could be a pretty stiff bat. I do think he peaks out after the season just because of looking at how he previously aged, the fact that he is pre-window. I think you got him at exactly 70 contact. How will that play out? Sometimes Mogul's okay with that, and sometimes it punishes it. So we'll see. But if he plays, he could be a pretty good power bat with a guy who will walk a lot. Now the Jimmy, I really think that Houston sold way too low to him, Seattle, to Seattle in the first place. But now with Seattle, they got that first baseman Jackson. He's decent, but I think he gets lost in the middle as far as the first base prospects go. Just nothing really jumps out at you as far as power or contact. He still could be a pretty good player, but just nothing really wows you. I think overall, I think the Royals got the better end of these deals. They got some known guys who they know what they're gonna do. However, the Royals kind of faded. They weren't one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the Central. I think that's what the G Dollars was going for, obviously. But we'll know more once next season takes off because this wasn't a trade that he made just on 21. It was made for the next probably 2 or 3 years. But right now, the Royals lost that, or the Royals got the better end.
All right. So those are the 2 Seattle deals. What is the next deal on our docket?
So the next deal was one that really didn't factor in this season at all. It was a pretty big deal. Kind of a lot of people were just floored that the Astros gave up an entire draft class as well as prospect. Was it Rick O'Farrell? If it's not Rick, we'll just call him Rick. It sounds good. It's a good, strong name for the first baseman DH Kent. Big time power bats. Yeah, there's not much to say on it just because it didn't really play into anything in 2103. But Ken had a really nice jump. O'Farrell kept that nice low and slow pace to him. Pick 3 allowed the Mets to get 2 of the better starting pitching prospect draft as well as, or along with their other first rounder. I still think the Mets make out better long term than the Astros. But you got to give the Astros credit to taking their shot, and if they hit, they get a middle of the order, big time bat.
Yeah, it was one of those deals that I think a lot of people were shocked on, because I know when I saw that I was like, oh man, a high end draft class and O'Farrell for a dude that looks a legit bat. Don't get me wrong, but it seemed like a lot to give up, and I think a lot of this had to do with TT and PR not being huge fans of the class as a whole. Um, so right after they made it. I messaged them. I'm like, really, you could have come at me and offered that deal for one of my big bat prospects. I would have gladly have taken that deal. So um, as much as Lloyd is, I'm not a huge fan of Lloyd O'Farrell, but I would have taken him. I would have taken the picks. Shit. I mean, um, I was a bit surprised with that big offer. So again, I think a lot of this had to do with the fact they did not like the draft class. Um, but when you pick third overall, there's got to be someone there you like more than um, just tossing things away. And I don't know. I'm a value guy. I feel like if they had package their second through sixth, even they could get a pretty solid prospect. Get a couple decent prospects or good prospects with that. Take it the third pick overall, and they could have flipped O'Farrell to somebody if they really wanted to. A guy like that usually has suitors coming out. So, but it is what it is. I think when it comes down to it, I think Kent's going to be a phenomenal bat. And we might look back at it and say, well, Houston didn't do so bad. So I think when we're doing the well, it's a little bit late for that. Never mind. So I was going to say the 2021 awards, but this was technically a 2020 trade, so we can't really talk about it. But I think in retrospect, when we go back a couple years from now, and Kent's one of the best bats in the league, and maybe actually making Houston something other than a bottom dweller, that we'll say, oh, well, maybe that wasn't the worst deal after all. So he's definitely the stud spec that TT was hoping for. So.
Yep, it'll be definitely a very interesting trade because of how much Houston gave up to see how it plays out. Will Kent be the big time middle basher, or will he fall short? And then what will happen to everything that he gave up? So the next one, we move on to another Royals deal. They got Marshall from the Braves for their first to third round picks. A left field, first base, DH, whatever. Can't play defense prospect, Garden, and salary dump of Gary Souders, I believe. So, granted, with my deal with the Braves, didn't turn out for the best, which we'll get to later. I really didn't like the price for Marshall when I asked Stang. He did have the highest price, and I just see that these past two seasons are just the epitome of what he is. He looks like he's going to be phenomenal, but he's had very few really great seasons. He's more of a 3.5 ERA pitcher rather than a guy you think is going to be like a low 3 ERA pitcher. It's not bad. If you're a team who wants to go to the playoffs, you can definitely use. But I think he looks a lot better than what he really is, and the value just isn't as good as what was given up. I don't really think much of Garden, however you want to say his name, but he does have some pop, and he is a prospect. He's not completely terrible. I think quietly Stang was pretty good for picking up Souders and then flipping him for a mid-round pick. I got phenomenal value for a guy who his on-field play is not worth the return.
Yeah, I kind of like Gaden. I'm not really sure how he turns out, but he just is one of those guys that he hits right. He could be a very useful player to have. And anytime you're taking a guy that's a pretty solid pitcher, call him an ace, don't call him an ace, I don't care. A guy that you'd label as an ace, and I would label Marshall probably with that title. Had I been selling him out, even if I had been going for him, I'd probably allow that title to be labeled onto him. So a 1 through 3 and a good spec, yeah, I mean that's a fair price for a good to ace pitcher. Especially when you're picking. I believe I can't remember where those picks were in the draft. Actually, I think they might have been a little bit higher. So, it might have been a little bit more than what he should have. Maybe he should have waited, and paid that for Patrick Jr. instead. Might have made a little bit more of a difference. But I don't think the prices were wrong. I think Stang did well in the trade, and I think that for as much as Casey didn't win this year, I think they're still set up nicely to have a good run here for a while. So Marshall pitched, oh gosh, excuse me, about the same, maybe a little bit higher than his career average out there in KC. So maybe that's because he's starting to slow down a little bit. Maybe that's because he was in a new place. Who knows? We'll see more next year. So, but I think it was a good deal for both of them. I think it got Stang what he needed as he started to rebuild, moving to his biggest piece that he was going to move. And I don't think that G Money overpaid at all. I think he paid probably what would be a fair price for a pitcher of that caliber. Again, didn't work out in the end, but nothing that I would necessarily knock. So, moving on to some more Atlanta trades, we have Atlanta sending Brant King, and I'm going to go with Robin Venturas, though I don't think that's it, for San Francisco's draft class and some prospects. So this was an interesting one. I think this is one of the ones that made the Giants a solid team. Like, I'm not a big fan of Brian King, and he definitely pitched almost a 4 ERA this year in San Francisco, so well above what he was pitching at. And looks like Paulo Ventura, so that was close, but not so much. Had about his typical year, which was quite good out there. So I don't know off the top of my head which prospects were sent back. Looks like Baron Harris and Chip Foley. So it's one of the, you get a closer and a guy that you're going to put anywhere in your 1 to 3 slot for a draft class, and a couple of prospects. Probably not the worst thing in the world. So Chip Foley, definitely a dude that's a movement first kind of dude, not somebody that I would necessarily hang my hat on hoping that he becomes a great player. And the other one, I already forgot the name. I'm going to go with Baron Harris. He, I do believe, is a batter. Let's look him up real quick and see how he ended up this year. And I don't even see him, so fuck it. It's one of those things. I think it worked out well for San Francisco because they won their division. Was it a bad division? Sure. But did they win it? Yeah, they're in the playoffs, and they've got a 3-starter out of it and a good closer. So Harris apparently is a pitcher. So I will. Oh, there he is. Yeah. Thank you for that, Cheeto. So he is a pitcher. Okay, yeah, one of those ground ball types, a little bit too close to the numbers. Looks like he missed a jump this year and kind of died a little bit. Man, I feel bad for Stang. I'll say this now. When we were prepping for this prod, and I was looking over some of the trades and some of the guys that went back and forth, and a lot of them to Stang because he was the biggest acquirer of people this past offseason. Good God, did he have a run of fucking bad luck with these guys? A lot of these guys that he traded for as big pieces in his trades just did not work out this year. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to die. I'm not saying that, but good God, a lot of them dropped and didn't, like, off of where they were. A lot of the pitchers that he picked up, a bunch of the hitters he picked up, definitely did not gain on their position as a prospect. Most of them actually dropped in their position as prospects. So that is just a bit unfortunate to his part. But all in all, again, Atlanta got those picks. I mean, it's going to come down to, does King of Venturas help San Francisco more than just winning a division title? Did they help in the playoffs? And how good do those picks that Atlanta picked up and used turn out for them in their rebuild? So it'll be interesting. Very interesting to see. So, Matty, what do you think about this one? Or I did that thing where I talked so much he left.
Nope, I just had it off for a second accidentally. So yeah, no. So I did kind of set Mizzy up to fail there. It wasn't a quite full draft class. It was missing a second round pick. So no, we weren't really duped the thing to get an entire draft class. So I do like King and Venturis. King was, of course, one of the three pitchers that I looked at a lot. Um, he's an interesting. He just, he has the movement there, but the control just isn't where you really feel comfortable with it. Kind of looks like one of those guys if he just has one drop, then he's not so appealing. Yeah, he didn't have as good of a season as he had shown in the past, but still okay enough. Uh, the prospects that were given up, well, they're technically prospects, I guess, but the picks were the real meat that was given up, and I do question if long term, if it makes sense. I don't think either of the guys that the Giants got are true long term pieces. I believe was Ventura dropping, or am I just making it up? I kind of think he's already started a little bit in decline, which yes, sometimes that can go real slow and it doesn't really matter. Yeah, he's already shown that he's declining. Um, looks like he kind of had a little bit of a random jump, which is kind of staved off the decline a bit, but this year back to dropping again. So you have to wonder how long will he be very useful. It's kind of mortgaging some of your, well, it's basically mortgaging your first round pick and some other stuff for a short term piece. Again, just I didn't look all too much to see what the picks got anyone in these trades, but Stang did get himself a lot of picks this year. A lot of things that were, yeah, maybe you have a prospect drop or not jump, but there's a winter ball to save you from that. Of course, next season too, they can jump right back up there. So for that, I think Stang won this. Then we move on to what I would label as another Mizzy trade because Mizzy was there in spirit. So
So
the Mets.
this one, I kicked myself pretty hard over this one. So
Yeah, this was a trade that thought, wow. So yeah, I thought, wow. The Mets and the Expos lined up for a trade to get Gilly Fat Fingers for Detmer and first and second round picks. Now, if you're not sure who Fat Fingers is, that is a third baseman, Art Sirixler, who Missy couldn't type his name on draft. I think Gilly actually made a good trade here. And I know that sounds condescending, and it is. I don't like Detmer at all. He's horseshit. He gives up way too many homers. I think he had a whatever is not completely terrible season this year, but because of that, the
15,
difference
13,
in
4.32.
yeah, because of the difference in then the movement and control, that's kind of about what you're gonna see out of the best of him. He's never gonna be great. He could run into a good season here or there, but it'll probably be with really low homer total. So really, it's just the 1 and 2 for Art, and that's not bad at all. He's a pretty good bat, and I don't really care about the errors so much. Yeah, they are kind of a problem. It's not that he's actually a bad fielder. His glove work is actually good. It's the fact that his erratic arm cost him errors. It'd be really interesting to see Mogul split up the errors with throwing and fielding. Just to see exactly where your players are going wrong. It does kind of seem like that the errors from the infield can be fixed a bit with a good fielding first baseman. Not sure to what extent, but I do know at least some people do believe in really good fielding first base can save errors, as you kind of see with like Boston's Cooper, kind of similar, but doesn't make a lot of errors. He did have did actually he didn't have Archie. So I'm completely stuff up, and Sloan's not that good either. So it could just be their makeup. However, I do still think that if you get like a 90 something fielding first baseman, which I think is something he could have been going for, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I think that can save your third baseman from some errors. What do you think about this one? Because I think you let a player get away from you, didn't you?
Here's what happened at the time. So Fat Figures is 93 now. At the time, he was in 95. And I had asked Decker after a player or two this offseason. I did not even ask about him because I'm just like, oh, he's a 23-year-old, 95 rated third baseman who should be a solid defensive third baseman with a hell of a bat. He ain't going to trade him. Why would he trade him? That wouldn't make any sense. So I didn't even ask. And then he goes for a pitcher that I agree with. For as much as I want to like Dittmer, I can't. And a late first and second, I'm just like, oh, like, are you serious? The one time you don't bug somebody about a fucking player and they go for that, like, good Christ, Mike, what is wrong with you? Like, it was one of those things. Like, I'm going to deal Faya, then I'll find a solid third baseman elsewhere, and I'll look smart. It'll be great. Blah blah blah. And then Art goes for that. I'm just like, and again, he had that minor drop. Does that mean anything? Might or might not. Who knows? But I don't think the Mets completely screwed the pooch on this one by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the first and the second, and a pitcher that you must like, I think is not the worst. And again, the Mets clearly not coming out yet. It's pick 12. Thank you, Andy. So Montreal won this year, so I just assumed that they did well enough last year to have a lower pick than that. So pick 12 is a little bit different. So he had an early mid-round pick in the first and the second, and a solid looking. I don't like him, but I bet a bunch of other people do like Dittmer, pitcher for that third baseman. So in that case, it's again, did Decker mess up? God no, not even a little bit. Especially if Dittmer gets another jump or two, starts looking a little bit better, somebody's going to pay him for them. So he might even flip Dittmer at some point and get even more capital out of this. So, but I do think Gilly did much better on the trade just because it helped him now. And he got a young guy for quite a reasonable cost. Pick 12 aside, quite a reasonable cost for a guy that I think is quite good. So.
Yeah, a good player, and they got a couple of really nice picks. Now, I didn't think it was 12. I just lined up one of his other trades, and I figured it was different. Could be wrong, but yeah.
Andy,
I know he got earlier pick.
I for some reason I thought Gilly was picking like the right around the 20 mark. So, 12 is a bit different.
12. I don't think it was 12, but just lining up another trade to see where the picks are and how I know comp fell. I don't think it was. I could definitely be. Let's see, Montreal. They won 77 games last year. So I could put them in the 77 in the 12 range.
Andy said he looked back. That's how he knows it's 12.
Okay.
I'm going to take Andy's word on it. So I like the deal for Montreal a bit more than the Mets. But I think the Mets could, again, the Mets had a hell of a good draft this year. So, regardless of whether I like certain deals for them or not, the players that they drafted this year are going to make them a contender sooner rather than later. I think they did very well in the draft. And they did that by adding a bunch of these early picks. So I think it worked out very well for them. The next deal that we have on the block is the White Sox and Philly. Phillies get Whitfield back with Chicago's second round pick for nothing and cash. So I don't want to talk about this deal because it annoys me because I was attempting to do the same thing and get Whitfield with a second for stuff. And if for whatever reason it did not work out, and then he went to Philadelphia for less stuff for basically the same deal that I was trying to set up. So it annoyed me a bit, but in the end, I didn't get stuck with Whitfield's contract. So I really shouldn't be that annoyed by it. But at the time, I was perturbed, to say the least. But again, for a team like Philadelphia, who was below their cap, had money to spend, um, made sense. Whitfield looks like he did drop again this year, which is not too surprising. He's got one more year left on that $32 million hit, but he played decently for Philadelphia this year, and Philadelphia made the playoffs. So to add a second round pick to take on some cap for a guy that you're going to play anyway, fuck it, good deal. And it was a good deal on the other end for Mike, who shed some of his contract woes. So before he decided to go into rebuild, he was selling some of the too many pieces that he had, and so nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, I don't think that I'd be perturbed by this trade. You don't gotta worry about that you dilly-dallied, a bit with a trade. Pretty much Whitfield is Whitfield. You think of him as being the big time basher. He's not that anymore. More of just that he's a name. I mean, when you see the contract that he's owed, you can certainly see why a second was attached just to move him. Because the White Sox didn't get much of anything. Got cash and a couple role player / bench / AAA depth guys. I think in the long run, it's probably kind of just a push for both teams because White Sox get to shed some salary. They get some guys who can be useful-ish. And then the Phillies, they get a player who they wanted to use right now. And they got some value back with that second round pick. Well, it wasn't just spending whatever $30 million on a guy who's well past his prime. So then we move on to my big trade for the offseason. What a fun one it turned out to be. So I got starting pitcher Brinson from the Braves for my first, or not my first, I think it was the Yankees first, and then my 4th through 6th round pick. So Mizzy, what did you think about this one?
I had a good giggle over it. It was so. I'm trying to remember back because I know I had talked to Stang a little bit about all of his pitchers, just because, as I stated earlier in this podcast, my rotation is definitely missing one of those big guys to kind of get us through in the playoffs. So I had put some feelers out there for some of those guys, and Brinson was one of those guys. Marshall was one of those guys. I knew Marshall was going for a big get, so I just kind of backed off of him. Talked a little bit about Brinson, talked a little bit about King with Stang. And it was one of those things that, said that he had a good offer on Brinson. And I was just like, if you have a good offer on Brinson, take it, because I'm honestly not going to give you a good offer on Brinson. It was just one of those guys that out of the 3 off his roster, was the one that I was probably worried about the most. And again, why? I don't know. But he was just one of those guys. There was a specific reason. I'm trying to look through his player card to see what it was. It might have been his playoff. I think Stang was trying to sell me on the playoff of these pitchers of his that he was selling. And when I was looking into it, no, so Marshall wasn't good in the playoffs. So Brinson was. Maybe it was Brant King that had the best playoff. Brian King. Keep on calling Brant King. Yeah. Brian King is just amazing in the playoffs. The 175 over 11 starts. So it was one of the things that came up. And something about Brinson, I didn't want to pay up on him. And he was saying he was looking for a Marshall-esque type deal on him. I believe Marshall went first. And I just wasn't down to clown on that. So I let him go and decided to go after some young guys instead. When you made it, I was like, well, crap, here goes Matty. He's going to make some deals this year and make a push. So I didn't think it was a bad deal for you. I think the way it turned out was unfortunate. But it is Stank's correct to me. Apparently, it wasn't a Marshall-esque deal. It was just whatever. It was months ago. I don't remember what the fuck happened. But I didn't think it was a bad deal for you at the time. Now it doesn't look like a great deal after that unexpected die. But at the time, it was a fine deal. Now you're probably a little bit, unhappy with it. But it is what it is. You're still at where you're at and still the favorite to win the World Series. So the source is me, Jermaine. I don't have to be right about myself. That's just a fucking guess.
Yeah. Obviously the trade did not play out like I ever saw it. I think this is why you take any, not any decent offer, but when you have a good enough offer, it's why you take it, because Brinson dropped not once but twice, and this is what you have. You know, maybe if St. kept him, he throws him for type B just because. I think would sign him as a type B, but you never know what Dan's gonna do with his money, so anything's possible. But you definitely aren't going to net anything close to a first round pick with him looking like he does as an 87. Now, when he's back to like a 93 when I got him, oh, that guy was really good. Like mid 80s control, mid to low 80s power, and then like 93 movement. I thought this was the best buy out of the three Braves pitchers. I'm pretty sure that people were kind of scared away because of the fact that he had a high salary and he needed re-signed after the season. For me, I wasn't really caring about that at all. I figured I could see about giving him a new contract at some point. Or at a worst case scenario, I could just punt him to free agency and collect my type B or my type A pick for him. Then after the first drop, well, now I can get a type B pick at least, and it won't be all lost. And then he dropped again, and then it's like, well, shit. I guess I'm just using him and saying, well, that was a fun season. It kind of sucks when you do stuff like this, but the fact that I'm where I'm at, I won the division. Can't say it was all bad. He still had a pretty solid season. Certainly not what I'd hoped for. Staying easily won this trade, but is what it is. Just move on. I think for some people, when they make deals like this, they think, "Oh, I got to recoup some value out of it, so I'm just gonna push them into free agency for type B and hope that someone signs them, and then you get them back, and now you're paying them 16 million when you really don't want to pay them any. Just cut your damn losses and move on."
All right, so just to appease our gentleman from the south, he is right. It was not Brinson. It was Moy. Moy was the one, or he was looking for the Marshall S. Ask, not Brinson. So Stang called me out. Stang was right as I go back through all of our things. So I could keep going back further to see where the Brinson stuff is, but I won't. I'm going to move on to our next trade. Our next trade is another Atlanta trade. Atlanta and Chicago Cubs. Cubs get Canton, relief pitcher, though I think he's still a starter technically by the Matty rule, for a second and fourth pick, and outfielder Nelson. So outfielder Nelson is a gentleman that is currently residing in the minors over in Atlanta, and looks to be pretty decent at the moment. Got a good glove. Seems to have continued his jump climb here. Left-handed hitter, 70, 92 overall. Interesting build. It's one of those builds that, probably a contact eye with a little bit of power build. I don't know. I'm going to guess doubles hitter, but that is just my guess for him. But yeah, a useful player, especially considering his health and his defensive capabilities. So to get all of that and a second and a fourth for the pitcher Canton, who ended up pitching quite poorly as a closer in Chicago with the 6.07 ERA this year. And again, I was right. He's definitely a starting pitcher, 70 endurance. Looks like he might have even had a bad drop this year too. So not one of those guys that Atlanta traded, had the unfortunate drop on their new team. So Atlanta looks like they come out even rosier on that deal. But at the time, you know, not a bad deal for the Cubs. Outfield prospect. Everybody has a lot of good outfield prospects. The second to fourth for a guy that you think is going to be your closer for a long time, not a bad deal. Didn't turn out good at the end, just like the Matty deal. But at the time, definitely one that's worth making.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's really worth making. Canton was already dropping before the trade, long before the trade. Continues to drop, I do believe, or not, or he's still declining. That's what really matters. So there's a guy who is declining. He's not going to completely fall off the table, but declining pitcher. I don't think he's worth quite that much, especially with the salary that he has. I mean, he's being paid like he's an elite closer, and he wasn't this year, and I don't think going forward he will be either. And he plays into that. Mogul just doesn't understand how to use him either. Thing. So gave up second and fourth round picks. That's solid value on its own, and then to boot, gave up that outfielder Nelson. He's not the greatest prospect. A lot of people probably wouldn't like him because he kind of needs to decide whether he's going to hit for power or if he's going to hit for contact. He doesn't really do either well. But I do like his arm and his range, and just the fact that he has some really nice upside. So there's time for him to get better, and by the time he speaks out, he might look like a pretty decent prospect. So another easy win for the.
Yeah.
And
all right.
then
One of those trades. What's our next one?
next one is another Braves trade with the Mariners. Now, your little Mariners got whatever left fielder DH Kruger for some quote unquote prospects. Now, I say prospects because I laughed my ass off when you and I were talking trade for an outfielder, and you thought you would sneak Younger and like he's an actual worthy prospect. When I go back and look at the way that this guy has aged, I thought if this guy develops more than like 2 more years, I'll be shocked. And with seeing how it's played out this year, I think he is cooked after this season. He might not hit his window jump this off season, but he's a 75, so I could see I could see him falling all the way down to like a 75, 79, staying there for a year or two, and then finally jumping up to a 79, which is his window boot on one of the March 1st fights in the future. And that's what you're going to get. And I think he was the sort of centerpiece of the deal, and he's just not impressive. Now, Kruger, yeah, he's kind of limited to where you can play him, or if you can play him at all in the field. And he's not the greatest hitter, but he's decent. There's still some value to him. I mean, going to get an upper, like a 790s or an 800 OPS. That's something. That's not like a guy that you're just going to say, oh, he can't play at all. It's either a AAA guy or a free agent. There's some value. So I think he's definitely more valuable than a trio of what I would call cast-off prospects.
So this is one of those trades built out of the KC deal that we talked about earlier between Seattle and KC. So I mean, when you really look down the barrel of that KC Seattle deal, again, they gave up Alfaya and Jimenez, and with the prospects and pieces they got, they end up with the outfielder Kruger, first baseman White, third baseman Menendez, pitcher Cirillo, and I do believe half of McCartier, but I could be mistaken on that. I'd have to go back and look. Nope, McCartier had nothing to do with it. But so again, it was one of those things that some of the pieces that we picked up from KC, we picked up specifically to flip for other things that we thought we could use. That was this deal. Part of this deal was flipping the things that we got from KC for a outfielder that we decided that would be good to have. So, I'll take a guy that played as well as he did in the field this year. at an over 800 OPS, over 300 at batting average with a handful of home runs. Like, I'll take him all day. He did very well in Seattle. Um, very good hitter, good fielder. I mean, he'd do well anywhere. So, I think it's unfortunate that some of the guys that went to Atlanta in that deal did not make the grade this year and kind of had a poor jump season. But I don't think that necessarily means it was a bad deal for Atlanta. I think that I was about to say it was what it was, but somebody already made fun of me for that. So I think that it was a trade that happened that neither team is upset about, more than likely. But with that,
Yeah.
we'll move on to the next trade and the last trade that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the Mets and the Royals. Mets getting outfielder Tuch and salary relief for their 1 through 3 round picks. I believe in this case they were later first the round picks. So another one of those deals that I was just like, aw. Because I had asked about Tuch multiple times. It was told out of, even after Axe was traded, that Tuch was not moving. And then he moved and went to KC and had a goddamn good year. Almost 250, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs, 800 OPS. Like, yeah, he had the season that I thought he could have potentially had in Seattle. So it was a sad day in the Seattle household. To watch a player that we really liked and kind of wanted to go away. And I think that's what we eventually turned and made that move for Kruger, because the outfielder we really wanted was off the table, and the outfielder that we made a huge offer on decided to stay at the team that he was at. So Seattle made a bunch of huge offers this past offseason for a couple of big-time players, and were turned down both times. So it is
Yeah.
unfortunate. Neither of the players will be mentioned without permission from the other GMs, but we tried. I just didn't quite get it done.
Yeah. I would pronounce his name Touch. Kind of a little of a nod to Bon Scott and AC/DC. Will touch too much. Um, I think he could eventually become a very good bat. Big time power bat. A very huge power bat, if you will. Um, but I think at least for this season, you could easily make the case that Barabe's season was better, especially with his defense. He's actually good in the field. But of course, it's made for the long term. That the top 3 rounds of picks are really good value to get. Um, I think this is one where so far the Mets have won, but the long-term value will hinge on how much Touch hits, versus how much prospects or the picks turn into prospects, because they do that. I know it's a shocker to some people, but picks do turn into prospects. We'll see how they turn out. But kind of interesting that the Mets do trade away a couple of young prospect or young major league power bats same year. How will that play into their team build going into the future? And they might very well have a handful of outfielders who are lined up to be very good. I don't really know, but it is interesting when you trade a couple of what you think could be, 35 homer guys same season.
Yeah, but again, the picks that they made in the draft, I think than um, more than make up for what they gave out. For as much as it might set them back a year or two, moving big guys like that, it is what it is. So you did not
Yes.
find MZ staying, but that was a good try. So, all right. So, our last short topic on our pod that both Maddie and I thought was going to be short and ended up being the normal 2 hour length is position changes. So, Maddie, this is your topic. Why don't you roll out the barrel?
Yeah, so position changes. It's funny. So this is something that if you don't know, it's basically we had a big discussion over it. Should we allow it? Should we not? there's something that we should put in place of it. We couldn't come to a big consensus. However, it's been found out that pretty much Andy has said, no, it can't happen unless it's kind of like a very nominal change. He's going to change it back to what they were at the position before Mogul changed it. Before Mogul changed them to their new position. So basically, again, I don't know, I've said this many, many times. I've even put blogs up about it. It's just one of the things of you can't do it. You should know how it happens because I've been over this many times. If basically they play 2 seasons at a new position, in which the majority of the games at that position are at said new position, they're going to change. You can't act like, oh, I didn't know that my left fielder was going to change to center fielder and become elite. I've put it out there of how it's going to happen. And I know, some people, maybe you kind of miss one. I get it. But kind of looking over the playoff stuff and where I saw different teams, I uncovered a handful of players, a lot more than I ever thought would be in that situation that if they're left to where they are right now, as in file, they would get the PSC over to a new position. Now, sometimes you might say, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. Well, we're not allowing it, so it's Bush League at this point, and you're just adding more work to Andy. He's going to have to come in, and once you're found out, change him back. It's just stupid work. So basically, if you're going to play a guy out of position for a sim or two, heck, even a full year, it doesn't matter. You don't got to change him. But if you're doing it for back-to-back years, know that you're going to have them there long term. Just change them. They're going to be there anyways. They're going to be back to what they were after they've changed. And you're just adding more work to Andy. Just change them. So if you're wondering what the whole list is, I did put them all into my position changes just to let Andy know. These are the guys that before the playoffs you're going to want to change because guess what? They're going to position change over to a new position in the off season, and then you're going to have to have more work being laid onto you. Now, some of them, like I said, they could just be a goof. You didn't see it, you didn't notice it. But I think some are actual plays that people are thinking, maybe they can fall under the radar, make a position change, and now they become a lot more valuable. And it's whatever. But the advice would be, if you know you're going to do this, just put a position change in. It's not difficult, and it saves Andy future work.
I want to note that Seattle's not on that list. So
no, they are not.
How do you like me now? It's one of those things. Everybody, if you pay attention, you know how to do it. It's not hard to do. Just don't, because even if you do it incidentally, you might trade that player, and then somebody figures it out once the player gets traded, and then the whole trade gets fucked up. So just don't. Just do what Dan does and draft nothing but defensive guys and hope they get bats. Stop drafting bats and hope you can turn them into defensive guys. Just do it the way Dan does. It's worked out great for him.
Of course, you would say that because it's worked out for you too.
Yes, it has.
And the whole little rant about players changing after you traded for them, you wouldn't know anything about that. Definitely didn't happen recently.
I didn't even rant about it earlier when I felt like I was going to. I kept my mouth shut.
You did a very good job. I was impressed.
Oh, I had planned on ranting hard about it. Then I'm like that.
And sad at the same time because it was just so right there for you. But yeah, I mean, I'm someone who I've used the position changes in the past when we didn't have this sort of ban on them. And I would use them. It's great, but they're not allowed now, so just don't do it. We have enough of secondary positions added with the draft edits that you should be able to find a position to where they could actually fit in and play. If not, I don't know. Go to Andy and say, hey, this guy, I think he's terrible everywhere. And maybe he'll say, well, I think he's actually okay here. Or maybe, you can con him into giving him like first base stats and then, okay, you can stick him there or whatever. That might. But if you're going to play a guy at a different position, just change. That's that.
Yeah, don't try to con Andy. He does enough around here. Don't make his job harder. Make his job easier. So, um, that's what I have about that. But don't get me wrong. There's times where I'm like, shit. My shortstop went down, or my third baseman went down, or my second baseman went down, or my second baseman went down, or oh no, that was this year. But no, there's times in past years where I've had a guy go down. I'm like, shit, and I pull up another one of my guys. I'm like, he might work there. And I'll message him. I'm like, hey, is this guy legit going to do okay there, or is this going to be one of those things where everybody's like, why the fuck's he playing him there? And he'll straight up tell you, yeah, he could, yeah, he might. Don't do it. Yeah, sure, try it. Like he'll give you a pretty straight answer, and then you go from it from there. So, but yeah, and again, some people switch positions and don't. I really don't think it's intentional. Because not everybody takes the time to go back and read the stuff that Maddie's posted about this or remember chats about this. Not everybody lives in chat like some of us do. So things do happen that are incidental, but at the same time, there are people that could theoretically try to sneak people through this way, and it is what it is. And don't get me wrong. Some people might legitimately just be moving them to different positions while in the minors because they have a bunch of guys in the minors at that position, and they want everybody to get their at bats. I've known a lot of people that have done that in the past too. Is that position change? It depends on which reason they're doing it for. But again, a lot of excuses out there. A lot of things are like, well, I was actually doing it for this. I wasn't doing it for that. Just know that Big Brother Matty's watching you, and if you do it, you'll get caught.
Well, say I'm not the only one who watches that. I know that, but it's not really the point. Two point fingers at anyone. Yeah. Shit happens. You didn't really think that the guy was there or whatnot. You didn't realize that he was there for that many seasons. No one's really pointing a finger. It's just, come on, look at it, know it. Hey, move him to the position that you're playing him as. And kind of like Mizzy said, even if you're interested in seeing, hey, can this guy actually play a different position? Just ask Andy because he'll tell you. If it works out, change him over. Just one of those. Just be a little more vigilant about what you're doing with the players because it's not just a me thing or whoever else watches it. It's you're eventually just adding more work.
And you do know how Andy loves more work. So
always.
Always. Alrighty, it is just about 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which means it is well past my bedtime. So I think we have covered enough here tonight. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. Hopefully tomorrow I can finish the Poldy Pod. I caught most of that today. In between meetings and kids being kids, and was enjoying that, so I can't wait to finish that out. But for Maddie and I, from all of us to all of you, have a pleasant evening or a pleasant morning or afternoon when you're listening to this. Jermaine is about 6 bottles of wine in at the moment, so this will not be up until sometime tomorrow when he wakes up and then gets over his hangover. Good luck to all the playoff teams out there tomorrow. Hopefully things go better for you than they're going to go for me. So with that, good night, good luck.